I feel like it is a lot more stereotypical if I were to ask questions about Black culture that are more stereotypical. I feel like that would come off as racist, whereas you guys asking a whitespert about it doesn't necessarily carry that same label. And I was wondering, where does that come from in this day and age? Like, I could get if this was the 60s, 70s, 80s, hell, even the 90s, where there's a lot more of a racial undertone. But why is it more racist or why is it perceived racist when a white person asks questions about Black culture versus the other way around?
It's how the question first when you talk about racism stems from, it is a power dynamic. And if you are part of the marginalized, then you can have, like, being a member of a marginalized group does not omit you from having prejudice views. It does not exclude you from being able to hold prejudices and enact your prejudices in a very individual way, right? Like, if I owned a convenience store and a white person walked in and I did not serve them, or if I, treated them differently than I treat the remainder of my customers who are part of my ethnic group, that would be prejudice. I've impacted this person on an individual level. However, racism is about systemic and enduring power. And in the United States, there is a legacy of systemic and enduring power that benefits people of European descent and marginalizes, disenfranchises, and humiliates people without it. So then once you put that in the context of, all right, you might say, I'm just asking me as an individual, doesn't matter my ethnicity, but if I'm part of that larger dominant group in force asking a question that then it could more so result in the framing of the question. But if you frame the question from the standpoint of, hey, I want to know why a Black person does X, Y, and Z, right? And if that person frames it in a way that isn't considering their own history or the history of how this society has functioned in the askings of their question, then it comes off as what you're doing is further marginalizing and humiliating me as now the individual and asking me to answer for every person and expecting that my ethnic group that you don't understand now is this supreme monolith. Because that's another thing that happens. Like when you talk about quote unquote the term Asian, right? Asian lumps together an entire half of a continent into a demographic that those people do not have a singular unitary identity with. In the same way, if you say Latinx person or Latino person, that is not a singular identity. That is us as Americans grouping massive amounts of cultural groups in together, not understanding their individual histories, perspectives, ideologies. It's about like the choice of words that is being used and that understanding of history and context, and people like to remove themselves from that context because they say, I as an individual am not personally responsible for the actions of what happened before me, but it's like, cool, you are not a perpetuator of what is in the past. However, if you benefit from the system that was set up, you still have to be conscious of how you're framing your own individual existence. You don't get to, like, I joke with you, your name's Patrick, you're from Massachusetts, you're redheaded, so there's a good chance that somebody in your past came from the Republic, or not the Republic at the time, but the Emerald Island, right? Mm-hmm. So there's, with that, there are jokes that could be thrown. You're from Massachusetts, I could, hit you with the Peter Griffin accent and do all of those things in jest. And I have an individual relationship with you that we have formed where, I'm utilizing a context to make these references, and not in any malicious way, just more of like an understanding of like, these are things that are culturally common in our society. And yes, Irish people came here not under the best of circumstances to America. And when they first got here, they were not viewed as part of the white monolith because they were coming from an impoverished background. However, they were able to blend in, right? They were able to acquiesce to the system. They were able to be accepted as white because they were not Black, right? Or they were not brown. They were not some other. We've had literal laws on the books the Chinese Exclusion Act, right? Like that is a major law that stopped people from literally entering the country. We interned Japanese people because other Japanese people bombed us, not looking at the loyalties of these people. Like whole generations of farms were wiped out in California because of those internment camps. And then, you know, I could talk about the history of black people that's still occurring in this country, and then people's apathy towards it, and then saying, well, oh, that was such a long time ago. Tamir Rice was murdered for being a black kid with a fucking toy gun 3 years ago, right? Like, George Zimmerman is still a free man, right? Like, anyone with a brain can see that that was murder. But they're then going to say, well, in a court of law, it wasn't proved murder, so George Zimmerman gets to run around and be free. Like, I say all this to say, there's still a context that views people who are not white as other and not as an inclusionary fashion, and there are systemic things that have to be repaired in this country for it to not be viewed as racist. So that's why I said, if you have a relationship with someone, you can ask those questions. It may not be racist, it may not be reflective of that power, but it is about how you then choose to say all those things.